Charlie, I think you did outline 12 already.
I did? Anybody
Yeah.
else?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, I got ahead of myself. Maybe I hit my head on a rock and forgot. Okay, we're back, right? It didn't take long. Okay, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so you have another assignment, number 15. Well, that won't be due until you take the P3, and that's 2 weeks from today. Okay. 1 week from today is L2. Okay. If you're confused about that, email me. I know I've emailed you about it. The discussion question today is a little bit different. I want you to propose a discussion question. You know, I could ask a COVID question, but we're also dead tired of hearing about it. You know, good or bad, what's happening to you, it's happening to everybody else too. I'd rather just, I don't know, steer away from that as a question unless there's something new. Okay. But I want you to propose a question for discussion that you think will be of interest to the students in anatomy or in the health field in general. It doesn't have to be our students. Okay. Do not answer your own question. If you propose a question, okay, that's all you have to do. Now, you can also, instead of proposing a question, wait till enough questions to select from get posted and answer one of the questions. Enter one of the discussions. Okay? Either is fine. You don't have to do both. You may do both. Okay? And that's it. Sometimes I feel when I propose the questions, some of them I think are necessary, but others, that's what I want to talk about. Maybe it's not what you want to talk about. So let's find out. Okay. This might be a time for your question. May have gone away because her video's off. Maya, you there? Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your question now? This might be the time to answer it.
For week 10, the last thing is practice vessels quiz for L2. L2 means like lecture exam 2?
Yes. L stands for lecture, and PO stands for practicum. Okay. I get tired of writing them out, so I thought by now we knew them. Lecture exam 2 is a week from today. So you have a week to work on this one. Okay. And these are questions that will show up, or the type of questions that will show up on that exam. Okay. I promised you another exam, so there it is, another practice quiz. Also have a little section here for preparing for L2. That's the lecture exam next week. Okay. I'm going to remove this one because I sent you an email last night. All of you should have gotten an email. If you didn't check today, you'll get an email on preparing for L2 from me. This was written for another class earlier. That's why I'm going to delete it, but it says the same thing. And your email that you got from me should say the same thing. If you did not get an email for some reason, first check the spam box or folder. Let's find out if you really got it. Okay, and if you really didn't, email me and I can email you back. Okay, if you're already in a team with other people, if you formed a group and exchanged email addresses, they all have your email address. They can forward it to you too if you'd rather contact them. But it's the digestive system lecture and the cross section of the GI tract and the serous membranes. Okay, those are going to all be on the L2 in a week. The structure of the heart and the pathways going through the heart, we're going to review this on Thursday. I don't have lab material scheduled for Thursday. For Thursday, I will instead want to review with you. Labeling of important structures of the heart. I did give you a sheet. It's on the canvas here that says heart structures. And that those are the ones that you're expected to know. Now be able to label. The urinary system. The components of the blood, formed elements, non-formed elements, red blood cell, white blood cell, as to what we spoke about them. The vessels of the circulatory system, this does not mean identifying all the human and cat vessels. That's coming in 2 weeks. Now on the practical, this refers to muscular arteries. What is an artery? What is an arteriole? What is a vein? What is a venule? Okay. What is an elastic artery? And it's under the 9th week module, and the lecture is entitled Circulatory System. And then the respiratory system notes that are posted on Canvas. Okay. Anything that's posted within the lecture material, okay, and it's identified as lecture, will also have images in there, okay? And some of those images are important. They point out what the text is saying. So, for instance, on the heart, you'll have images, and you'll want to take them to heart if I repeat the word there. Okay. So the images are important. Everything posted in the lecture topic is important. 100 questions, multiple choice. Okay. And the rest of this is not for you, and I'm going to delete it now. Because, like I said, I knew it wasn't for you last night, and I sent you a separate email. Okay. Today's lecture, when we get to it, we're not there yet, integumentary system. This is a short lecture, not a terribly difficult lecture at all, not like the digestive system. And you may not even have thought the digestive system was difficult, but there's a lot of terminology. That's what makes it difficult. I have a checklist for the practical exam in 2 weeks. That checklist will move up to week 11 when we get there. But here's what we'll be covering. And see, the list is different. This is the stuff that was under lab, parts of the brain, the functions of those brain parts, the eye, the ear. Now the heart repeats, but this time you have to identify more structures. Vessel identification, that means human vessels and cat vessels. I've shown you some cat vessels. I have not yet shown you the human vessels. I will. Okay, and I will finish showing cat vessels some more today. The fetal circulation that we talked about last lecture, under the microscope or under the images of the white blood cell artery vein cross section. You haven't looked at the artery and vein cross section yet. You have looked at the white blood cells. Okay. And the cranial nerves, what they are and what their functions are. Okay. This is the material that will be covered in P3. Now it goes ahead and lists the parts of the heart once again. and the brain and the eye, but you actually had that already in the lab. Here it is to summarize again. Main thing here is what's in P3, which very few people are going to worry about until after L2. It's just, like I said, human nature. Okay, Thursday I'll lecture on nervous tissue, what we're going to talk about right now in the book and in the reading. And I do not have a lab scheduled for Thursday because I want to review instead. If you don't have any questions, I will have a lab on standby. So let's now look at chapter 12. My chapter 12 starts on page 350. No, we did that one. You said we did that, right? Then we'll go to 15. You'll notice I'm skipping 2 chapters. That's okay. Those aren't difficult chapters. 15 needs a little bit more attention. My chapter 15 starts on page 467. Depending upon your version, page numbers may not match, but the figure numbers will. That's what counts. Okay, the first thing I have on chapter 15, above the actual first paragraph of text, is a flow chart showing the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. You see that? Let me know if you see it. Wave your hand or anything. Okay. If you don't have your book, okay, still, then you're going to have to make notes, okay, for yourself, or come back to this recording when you do have your book. Okay. So yes, figure 15.1 is important. Not difficult, but it's important. Then please begin the reading of the overview of the autonomic nervous system. And that's what we're talking about here, autonomic nervous system. I'm going to assume for a moment you don't have the slightest clue what the autonomic nervous system is. You may have been taught it in Bio 20, you may have been taught it in high school, but I'm going to assume you don't remember a thing. Okay? And I know, I mean, I'd be doing justice by you to say that, but it's something that can slip away quickly, you know, because you don't use it every day. I mean, you don't use it in your speech, your conversation, or anything. Okay, so overview, yes. Comparison of autonomic and somatic motor systems, yes. I have a huge picture, figure 15.2. Take a quick look at it now, but come back to it. You will not understand it yet. You will not understand it, not expect it to. Maybe the person who wrote the book thought you could jump right into it. But I think you take a quick look at it, knowing that some of these things are going to fall into place as you read, and then come back to figure 15.2. Okay. Figure 15.3, no, no. Okay. Continue on with the reading, and now you're down to divisions of the autonomic nervous system. Yes, double star. Sympathetic division, parasympathetic division further down the page. Figure a table, table 15.1. Read briefly and refer back to it as you read the text. Do not memorize this table. I'll give you a table to memorize that summarizes this one, but it does help if you take a quick look at what's going to be expected in the chapter anyway, and then when you read the chapter, come back to this and settle down just by reading what it has to say and how it matches the text. The clinical application, no. There are 4 differences outlined next. One about the thoraco and the lumbar division and craniosacral. That's number 1, just so we are on the same spot. We find number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those 4 are very important. I'm going to give them to you in our text. I'm going to lecture on it for you, okay? So any part of this chapter that seems like it's too far ahead of you, don't be alarmed, okay? Don't be alarmed. But do 1, 2, 3, and 4.
But the ones under clinical application, you mean, Charlie?
Yes, it's under clinical application in my text. I don't know if you all have clinical application. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay. But there's 4 differences between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. Now, right now, I said sympathetic, parasympathetic, and you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. That's okay. Okay. Giving you a guide, and I am going to be going over all of this that's important, all of it. Okay. When I first started doing the nervous system myself years and years ago, I found it was difficult to lecture on, and I found it was difficult to get it across to the students. And I was sort of disappointed in myself, at least the first year. But every year, every semester since then, I enjoy it more and more and more and more until I hope my enjoyment of these nervous system chapters shows up to you, and that you have a much easier time getting used to them than the people who did about 15 years ago. I'm sorry for them, but they're long gone. They're got their professions now. Okay, turning the page, and it says parasympathetic system. Okay, but more important than that is figure 15.4. It shows you a division between the 2 systems that we've been naming, sympathetic and parasympathetic. 15.4 is a must. Okay, that's going to be a short chapter to outline because I want you to stop there at the parasympathetic division. We are covering it, we're lecturing on it, but I don't want you to try to outline something that right now is frankly gibberish. You I would not expect you to understand it yet. Okay, I've already pushed the envelope here a bit to get you to this spot. I won't ask you later on to outline it, but you may wish to do so for your own benefit, okay? But don't do it now. Please don't do it now. Stop at the parasympathetic division, and by the time I get there, it will be able to pick it up and make good sense of it. Okay, that's it. Okay, we're back on sharing the screen again, and I want to do the integumentary system. The integumentary system will not be on L2. It wasn't on our list. It will be on L3. So you're thinking, well, it's so far in the future. I can relax a little bit. Try to give it the same attention you give everything else, and it'll just help you even more when you get to having to answer questions on the integumentary system on L3. Okay, the integumentary system. The components of the integumentary system are the skin and the appendages. Everybody was thinking possibly the skin. Always remember the skin is the largest organ of the body. I can probably steal questions from you, steal points from you if I ask them, but you should know it, obviously. It's should be second nature. We'll get to the skin. That's what we're going to concentrate on. We're not going to concentrate on the appendages. The appendages are your hair and nails. A lot of people make a lot of money on hair and nails. And skin too. The functions of the skin. The first one, I had to do that, is protection from abrasion. Okay. Well, if you scrape yourself against something like a thorn or even a stucco wall, you're abrading the skin. It's protecting against deep abrasion, but the outer layer of the skin is going to take the brunt of the abrasion anyway. Okay. So in protecting something, you still get hurt. Okay. Protection from abrasion. Probably more important, protection from infection. When the skin gets burned away, you have an opening for infection. First degree burns, minor, they don't get anywhere near deep enough. Second degree burns get deep. Third, you can go to the bone. Fourth degree burns. Ever hear of fourth degree burn? Fourth degree burn is referred to as carbonization. Okay. Another thing that the skin does is to protect from desiccation or your drying out. The skin regulates the body temperature, cooling you by sweating, warming you somewhat by moving the circulation within the skin towards the outside or deeper inside. And the production of vitamin D. Vitamin D, well, most of you taking vitamin D now? You could be taking a multivitamin, of course. A lot of people just take it as a supplement, just on its own, especially with the pandemic here now. Okay, it's supposed to have some helpful effects. Vitamin D is it's necessary to have skin exposed to sunlight to produce your own vitamin D. Years and years ago, when babies weren't exposed to the sunlight, or if they did go out with their parents, they didn't go in a little stroller like we see today. They went out in a damn boat, perambulator it was called, and it had a cover over it to shade the kid. And a lot of kids developed diseases because they weren't producing enough vitamin D. And somebody figured it out. The vitamin D was the missing factor. So let's put it in something that everybody gives to their babies. And that was milk in those days. Formula wasn't invented yet. I'm talking about way back early 1900s. And they fortified milk with vitamin D. You can't buy too many types of, you can buy some, the organic and everything. But most milk, you'll see is fortified still with vitamin D. Even though I understand, I'm not a parent, I understand that vitamin milk is not often given to an infant. Am I right or wrong about that? Like I said, I'm not a parent. What's in formula?
I think milk is given more now than it
Really?
used to be. I think people have relaxed a little bit on it.
Okay. I don't know. I have to ask you sometimes. Okay. The skin, largest organ of the body again, divided into two main regions. Okay. The first region is the epidermis. So if you touch your arm or any part of your body right now that's covered with skin, you're touching the epidermis. The epidermis is the outer layer. It's divided into 5 regions. The 5 regions of the epidermis do not have a blood supply. The blood supply runs a little bit deeper in the skin, but right close to the base of the epidermis. Close enough that oxygen, CO2, and nutrients are exchanged, and they make it through the living parts of the epidermis. The living parts of the epidermis are some of the layers that are deep. The exterior layer, the one that you would touch, is dead. Okay. Our skin is dead. It's flaking off all the time. If I've never met a person being chased by a bloodhound, but I see it on the movies all the time. The bloodhound is sniffing out the dead skin cells that you're dropping all of the time. That's what it smells. Okay. The epidermis, being 5 layers thick, it's going to have a lot of cells. It's considered to be this type of tissue: stratified, many layers, squamous, flat layers at the top, epithelial, any covering and lining tissue. You don't need to know this now, but in the last section, when we do tissues, we're going to learn all of the tissue types as well. And definitely you will have to know at that point that the epidermis is stratified, squamous, epithelial tissue. Okay. If you printed out your notes, this would be something I would already underline. Okay. The stratum corneum. This is the very outermost, topmost layer. Can easily be 20 or 30 layers thick. So again, touch the back of your hand. Is your skin thick or thin there?
And
I would call it thin. Where's your skin thick? heel. Okay, it's going to be thick on the heel. That's one place. Okay, if you look at your fingertips, they're not real thick, but they're not real thin either. They're not as thin as the palm of your hand. They go to draw blood, and they do a finger stick. Okay, why stick the damn needle in tough skin? Go for another spot. My suggestion, anyway. The stratum corneum is dead. The cells that you touch on the outside are dead. And the 20 or 30 layers below that continue to make up the stratum corneum are dead. But they do one thing that's really great, besides protect against abrasion. Who cares if a dead cell gets abraded, okay, or lost? They protect against desiccation or drying out. They have a chemical called keratin within them. It's a protein, and this reduces the loss of water. There will be a diagram coming up here, as always, okay. But we'll talk about the second layer without seeing it just yet. That's the stratum lucidum. Sometimes it's a thin layer. It's only one cell layer thick, but other times it can get 30, 40 layers thick. This is the only layer of the epidermis that's so variable in thickness. Where your skin does not get worn or subject to a lot of work or pressure, this stratum lucidum is thin. But when you work with your hands, with a hoe or a tool, or you develop a callus, it's the thickening of the stratum lucidum that's occurring. And this is meant for protection. And it's also just a consequence of the overuse. It's found on the soles of the feet, the heel, the toe, the fingertips, and the pads of the hand. What I mean by pads? Well, the thicker portions at the base of the thumb, it does feel soft, but it's actually quite thick. Okay. First layer, top, stratum corneum, stratum lucidum. Then there's a layer underneath that. That's why they call it stratified, many layers. The third layer is the stratum granulosum. Just underneath the stratum lucidum, it contains a chemical called hyalokeratin, which can also be converted or turned around and called keratohyalin. They're the same. How do we know it contains this chemical? Because we have dyes, and under the microscope, a slice of skin dyed with the hyalokeratin specific dye will show a color. That's how we know about elidin. That's how we know about keratin. Oh, I didn't mention elidin. Elidin is a chemical found in the second layer. We'll come right back to it. Don't worry. The hyalokeratin is found in the stratum granulosum. They named the stratum granulosum because it appears to have granules inside. Nothing fancy. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is the first occurrence that we can see histochemically, that means using chemicals on tissue slides, is hyalokeratin. Okay. It's found in the stratum granulosum. In fact, it helps us identify the stratum granulosum. The stratum granulosum is pretty deep in the skin. It's going to be pushed up though as more skin is produced, and it's going to eventually reach the top, and it's going to flake off too. As it moves higher and it becomes the stratum lucidum, it does convert to the stratum lucidum. The chemical hyalokeratin is closer to ultraviolet light, okay, and converts to elidin. As this layer moves up and becomes the stratum corneum, the elidin is now closer to the sun and ultraviolet light. It is changed to keratin. Now, what about this top layer? Does it move up? Sure enough, it falls off. It flakes off. Okay, so one becomes the other. It's almost like, think about it. Here's a 10th grader down here, becomes an 11th grader, becomes finally a graduating senior. You just keep moving up. We've got two more layers. The stratum spinosum is one of them. The stratum spinosum is a thick region of 20 or so cell layers. They call it the stratum spinosum or the spiny layer because it does appear to be bubble-like, bunch of bubbles or balls, but they have little spears sticking from one ball into the next, from one bubble into the next, from one cell into the next, somewhat holding them together. That's a hypothesis, means it's not proven. We see it, that's for sure. But the actual function, not for sure. The stratum spinosum. We have a single layer of cells called the stratum basal. This is the lowermost part of the epidermis, and it is alive. These cells in this single layer, sometimes people say that there are two, and some of your books will say that, so I put two here as well, but I've never seen it more than a single layer, okay? But one or two, you won't be asked a trick question. And they divide and divide, that's all their job is. And when a cell divides, it divides in two. One cell, the new one, the daughter cell, is pushed upward, and the other cell stays put to divide again and again and again. Plants grow this way, and so do parts of animals, parts only. Whole animals don't grow this way, with the possible exception of a jellyfish. Because of its unique ability to divide, the stratum basal is also referred to as the stratum germinativum. Germinativum, or germ anything, means living, growing, dividing. We listed 5 layers, starting at the bottom now: stratum basal, spinosum, granulosum, lucidum, and corneum. The only constantly dividing layer is the stratum basal. Some people have reported that they see an occasional division in the stratum spinosum. An occasional division is nothing compared to constantly dividing. So the stratum basal is the stratum germinativum. It's alive, it's dividing. The stratum spinosum, we can consider it dead. How does it get 20 cell layers thick then? Because the stratum basal keeps pushing more and more and more into it. Almost another way to think of it, like breaking off balloons, helium balloons, letting them float up there to the next layer high. Finally, it'll push it into the stratum granulosum area closer to the sun. It develops the hyalokeratin. Stratum granulosum is dead. Dead for the lucidum. Dead for the corneum. And then to repeat this, it's important to note that the epidermis is avascular. Don't know if we've used that term before, but it's easy. No blood supply. The beginning cells in the stratum basale can be rounded or oblong, but as you go higher towards the outside, and finally the stratum corneum, all of the cells begin to flatten, and finally they are flat. And that's why we call them this whole tissue, not just each layer. The whole tissue is called stratified, many layers, squamous. I'm going to let you use the term flat here. Epithelial, covering, and tissue. Now we need to see a picture of this. This is the epidermis. And we'll do it in the opposite direction this time. Here's the stratum basale. It sits upon what we call the basement membrane. It will show in another diagram. The basement membrane is like the floor that you're on right now, okay, or the seat of a car if you're still driving, okay. If you're sitting in a chair, count yourself in the chair as a cell, and you are stuck to the floor. If there were somebody sitting beside you in a classroom setting, which we don't have, then they would be the next cell over, and the next cell over, and the next cell over. And the stratum basale would be one row of students. Okay, these are capable of dividing, these cells are, and they divide and accumulate in the stratum spinosum, which are already flattening out. The stratum granulosum with its granules are showing here. The smaller stratum lucidum, unless there's a callus formed, then it gets huge. And then look how flat the stratum corneum becomes. Dead, 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 alive. The stratum basale better keep dividing, or we'll be down to not just skin and bones, just bones soon enough, and muscle. There's a deeper layer to the skin. We said earlier, there are two parts to the skin. The epidermis, and we divided it into these 5 strata. And now the deeper part of the skin is the dermis. It's considered to be dense, irregular connective tissue. You don't need this today. You don't need this for L2 next week. Okay, you will need it for the remaining exams, however. The dermis is vascularized. If you make a paper cut and it doesn't do anything, doesn't bleed, you haven't gotten out of the or through the epidermis. If it does bleed, you have definitely penetrated into the dermis because it is the only part that is vascularized. Dermis is also given a second name. It's almost like somebody wanted to double the volume of vocabulary in anatomy. Everything's got at least two names. The dermis is the corium. There are glands within tissues. The sweat glands are found in the corium. So when you sweat, you're not sweating from the epidermis, but you're sweating through the epidermis with tubules that come from below. And the sweat glands are called sudoriferous glands. Another term. The secretion of a sudoriferous gland, though, is very nice, easy to learn. It's just called sweat. Okay, here's a section through skin. At the top, we obviously got the stratum corneum exposed, and we've got the epidermis at the same time. The epidermis extends only down, follow the arrow, to here. This is the bottom of the epidermis. Okay. And then you have the dermis, which is the lighter color. And then in yellow is the hypodermis, and that's not a part of the skin. It's always included in a skin diagram, however. The hypodermis is a fatty connective tissue that connects the skin to the muscle below. So when you skin something or peel the skin away from something, then in that case, you're stripping it right at the hypodermis. Now, if you get a sunburn and you're peeling your skin, no, you're not going that deep. This is a sweat gland right here. It's located in the dermis. The dermis is dense. It has fibers going in all directions and vessels, so it's irregular, and it's also connective tissue, connecting epidermis to hypodermis. The sweat gland looks like a series of tubules. And it essentially is, it starts as a hose that only has one end. Here's the end here out. The sweat is secreted into the lumen of this convoluted tubule. And more sweat forces the sweat out. And out it goes to here. The body of the sweat gland is located in the dermis. The sweat gland, small as it is an organ. This is an organ. We're going to look at the oil gland in just a moment. Here's an oil gland. It secretes an oily substance into the follicle of a hair. If there's no hair present, it doesn't mean that the sebaceous gland or oil gland doesn't secrete oil and exude it out through the pores left by the hairs that are no longer there or never were there. You've all had oily skin. You've all had times when your hair is oily. This is where it's coming from. This oil gland may be matched by other oil glands, like on this side over here, here, here. But glands are always lobed. And so there may end up being another extension off of here. I'm drawing an imaginary spot that is connected to this one. Okay. Glands are always lobed. Okay, epidermis shows here, dermis shows here, subcutaneous tissue. Okay, they don't even want to give it credit as hypodermis, because hypodermis misleads some people into thinking it's skin. No, it's not. It's below the skin, hypodermis. Okay, here's the sebaceous gland. You see it, and we can see it in print down here. They're also known as oil glands. The secretion of the oil gland is not called oil, no, never oil. It's called sebum, S-E-B-U-M. The composition of that, composition of sweat can change depending upon the time of year, diet, any number of factors. Some glands secrete only fluids. Here's a gland that secretes only fluids. The sweat gland secretes a fluid only. If that's the case, it's called a merocrine gland. Merocrine gland only secretes fluid. It's an exocrine gland. An exocrine gland, the sweat gland, secretes its fluid or sweat and delivers it to a specific location, the exit of the pore. All exocrine glands, and the sebaceous gland is one too, deliver their secretion by a duct to a specific location. Here's the image of a merocrine gland. Here's the duct. The secretory product is sweat. Here's your cells, they're all intact, and they're secreting outwardly the sweat. Fluid only. The skip one, the holocrine gland is a gland that breaks off entire cells. There's a fluid, but entire cells are being broken off and delivered somewhere. Well, this is a oil gland. This is a sebaceous gland. Oil gland, sebaceous gland deliver entire cells. Now we have one, there's no picture on our website here, the apocrine gland. The apocrine gland, okay, here's its wall, and it secretes fractions of cells. It breaks down the cells, not completely disintegrating them, but breaking them, fracturing them, and sending off in a fluid fractioned cells. That's a mammary gland. An apocrine gland and mammary gland always go hand in hand. A mammary gland is an apocrine gland. A sweat gland is a merocrine gland. A sebaceous gland or oil gland is a holocrine gland. They're all glands because they have secretions. It's the type: fluid, partial broken cells, and fully fluid filled with cells intact. Below the fatty layer, below the dermis is a fatty layer called the hypodermis, not a part of the skin. Said that before. Any questions on this? Okay, let me give you a break, please, until 3:30. The portion that I'm going to come back to, I'm going to do the vessels below the diaphragm. That doesn't take us too long, and I think we'll end up just right on time. If you think of any questions in the meantime, don't forget them. Please bring them back. Okay, see you at 3:30. Hello.
Hello.
Okay, for Thursday, try. Let's try as a group to get a few questions for the lecture test the following Tuesday. Okay, so uh, if you really don't have any questions, congratulations. You'd be expected to get 100%. But I think most of you can probably dream up a question that can help you out. So bring them and we'll try to use them in a review with you. Okay. We'll go ahead and return. Unless you do have one. We can. Okay. We're down here at 1026. Vessels below the diaphragm. Okay. So we're going to hold off on the nervous system until Thursday. And like I said, I've got no lab scheduled. I'll have one ready to go if you don't have questions, however. Okay, so vessels below the diaphragm. For the most part, these are shown on the cat. Okay. Wrong date. I gotta. It doesn't matter. Okay, we'll start with looking at the veins first. It really doesn't matter. We can go either way, veins or arteries. But when we're in the classroom, it's easier to see the dark blue of the veins than the pale red of the arteries. So we start with veins there. That's why it overlaps to here. Here's our diaphragm.
Charlene,
Yes.
is this on the practicum 3?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
This is all. We have finished L2. You know that. Okay. But we haven't finished practicum 3. And we've got 2 weeks to go for that. So there's plenty of time to finish it next week. Okay. And the only thing I have left to do really on practicum 3 is human vessels with you. Okay, and I'll be doing those very soon. Okay, here's the diaphragm of the cat here. And the only vessel penetrating through the diaphragm is returning to the heart. It's the inferior vena cava. We call it inferior vena cava whether it's in the thoracic cavity or if it's down here in the abdomen. Okay, let's just trace backwards on the vena cava. 2 organs that are unmistakable, but they're not drawn here. You'll see them in pictures in a moment. Are the kidneys. One kidney over here and a kidney over on this side. This is a renal vein. Here's a renal vein. Okay. You only have to identify this as renal. You don't have to say right renal or left renal. You don't have to say artery or vein. You have to only pick from the multiple choice the root word, renal. Okay. Now I do have a practice test that asks you to pick right and left. and everything else, and it slows you down, but that's fine. You've got plenty of time to do a practice test. These are the left and right renal. Now, the fact that I say left or if I say right, that's fine, but you're only going to be asked renal. Coming into the left renal is this vessel here. It's coming from the either ovary or it could be coming from the testes. It's probably going to be coming from the ovary, but in either event, it's coming from the gonads, the sex organs. This is the left gonadal. It's always safe to call this the gonadal, unless you know you have a male or a female cat, in which case you should step up and call it for male testicular, for female ovarian. Okay. Now, where's the right gonadal? Uh-oh, asymmetry here. It's over here. Here's the right gonadal. Now, they're both emptying into the inferior vena cava. This one down here, this one adding or joining the renal going to the inferior vena cava. It still gets everything where it is supposed to be. Now, once you find the renal veins, and it's actually a no-brainer, you can't miss the renal veins. Two small P-shaped organs lie right here, with a vessel, a vein going right across. These are the suprarenal glands. We also know them as the adrenal glands, but they're above the kidney, suprarenal. The vein may continue on for some distance behind, but we only worry about the part that goes to the suprarenal gland itself. The functions of all these glands that we don't cover now do get covered in the fourth section. Come down further on the inferior vena cava, and just before it splits and goes to the two legs, there are two vessels that join the vena cava, the iliolumbar, here and here. And it's almost a perfect right angle between the iliolumbars and the vena cava, the right angle being right here. Once you find the iliolumbar vein, easy to identify because it's blue, it really does stick out. You will also find the iliolumbar artery hugging it. You can't miss the iliolumbar artery. That's a twofer. That one's an easy one. Same thing with the suprarenal artery. It hugs the suprarenal vein. Let's go into the legs. There is an immediate split into the legs. Two large vessels, each a common iliac. This is the common iliac vein on the cat's left side. Here it is on the right side. The word common means that the vessel is going to split into or has been formed by the union of two vessels that have a similar name. So this is going out into the leg as the common iliac, and it's going to split right here and going downward like cake mix in a bowl going downward. This is the internal iliac. But continuing on is the external iliac. That will also split to the deep femoral, and outside of the body, here's where the body wall would be found. Outside of the body is the femoral vein. You can imagine what goes through here. The large intestine must go through here. The colon must go through here. Okay. The sex organs must be either located in here or outside and come through here. The bladder must also fit in here. This is that pelvic bowl, the area below the pelvic rim. Where is the pelvic rim? Follow the arrow. Pelvic rim is up here, comes across. Only occasionally, but recently I have seen it. The deep femorals join. We go back. So this part in the center is deep. I imagine it as a bowl, like a cooking bowl, a bowl that you might beat, as I said, cake mix in. Here's the lip of the bowl, the top of the bowl. And then you have drizzle. If you have ever made a cake, come on. As a kid, even most boys, I think, have tried to make a cake. I don't think we do too much of that anymore. Not all of us. And going downward is the internal iliac. Internal iliac, and you got one more going down. This one is the mid-sacral going to the tail. It does not always come straight down or go, since the vein is really going to the heart, go straight up. It actually often attaches right here, slightly off center on the right-hand side. The mid-sacral, just like with the sacrum itself, sometimes it's called the middle sacral or the median sacral. I think, and appreciate you're following the lead, if you don't mind, use mid-sacral. Okay. The external iliac is on the lip of the bowl, the top of the bowl. Then you have a small piece, the deep femoral. Now the deep femoral may not go all the way across, as I said. It may end quickly. It may not be a perfectly nice, smooth tube. It may be rather irregular. It may be so irregular that we just can't use it on a particular cat. And in the classroom, I go to another cat. Here, at least, I've been able to go to another photograph. Going out through the body wall is the femoral vein. It will split, and part will go to the kneecap, goes behind the knee. That's the popliteal. Here it is over here. But the part that goes all the way down to the ankle is the great saphenous, vein. We don't see it going all the way to the ankle in every cat. Every cat's different, every person is different. But when we do get to see it going all the way, it's really kind of spectacular. So these are the veins that drain the lower body and return the blood to the heart through the inferior vena cava. Here's the same thing in text. Okay. Here's the same thing in an unlabeled diagram for you to work with. And then we have arteries below the diaphragm. The text is first in this case, but I won't say anything different than is in the text. Here are the arteries underneath the diaphragm, which is right here. Above the diaphragm, unlabeled, is the descending thoracic aorta from last time. Once it punches through the diaphragm, this entire structure all the way down is the abdominal aorta. Let's do some things that make it easy. Let's find the kidney here and here, and the suprarenal glands just above it. If you looked for the veins already, you've already found both of these. And you can find the renal artery going into the hilus of the kidney. And above the kidney, you'll find the suprarenal artery. It will be small. The red ones do not show up as neatly or nearly as often. Okay, we're going to pass by these for a moment because coming down the aorta, finding the kidneys was pretty darn easy. Abdominal aorta again. Now, here's the gonadals for the arteries. The left gonadal vein, if you recall, attached to the left renal vein. That's not the case with the testicular in the male. In the male, it will attach like this. Even in the female, it'll occasionally attach like this, straight across. I gotta warn you, when you see the picture of this, I do have a good picture, but if you were in real life looking in a laboratory, you would have to search for these. They're there. You'd probably have to call me over to find them for you though the first time, because these are thin. These are like threads. Now skip this one for a moment, come down here. A 90-degree turn going across. This is the iliolumbar artery pair. We found the iliolumbar vein, and so now the iliolumbar arteries right there with it. If you're pinning, yeah, I get your pin right out because this is a piece of cake. Now I'm going to work my way upwards. Here's the iliolumbar. Can't mistake those. Go up, and I'm looking before I get to the gonadals. I'm looking for this one vessel coming off, and it will attach to the large intestine. This is bringing blood to the colon. This is the inferior mesenteric. It's going to go to the mesocolon. Occasionally, somebody gets too rambunctious and tears it off, not realizing what they've done. I try to get around the room quickly enough that I can find 3 or 4 good ones before people tear them off. Okay, and then it's pretty obvious. And I have good pictures of this. So this is the inferior mesenteric. We'll go up. We just need to do this much. Immediately coming out underneath the diaphragm, there's a vessel that comes off. This will take considerable amount of work for the person doing dissection to get the fibrous connective tissue away. But it's been done for you, and a picture has been taken. Okay. This first vessel off is the celiac, also known as the celiac trunk. And it splits into 3 parts, 3 main portions. One goes to the liver. One goes to the stomach. And the other goes to the spleen. Difficult to find is the hepatic, or the one going to the liver, just because it's usually small and often broken. But I have no difficulty ever asking the gastric, and the splenic, and of course the celiac itself. These vessels are coming up straight at you. They should be right here. This vessel should be right at you, coming straight at you. So if you put out a V sign with two fingers, your index finger and middle finger, make a V sign, and I'll point it towards your face, almost like a snake getting ready to strike. That's the way it would look. And it would be a V between these. This lower one that we haven't named yet is the superior mesenteric. And this one, instead of going to the mesocolon, goes to the mesenteries proper of the small intestine. I didn't do the lower ones, I'm sorry. Underneath the iliolumbar, we would expect the vessels to split to satisfy both legs. This first vessel here, same as over here, is the external iliac. There is no common iliac in the cat. That's one difference. We don't have many differences, but that's one difference. There's no common iliac artery in the cat. There is going to be a common iliac artery in the human, and I'm going to be showing you photographs of that. Okay, but here's external iliac. Where's the internal? We go forward. I'm still actually in the aorta. Now I'm splitting off two ways. These are the internal iliac arteries. And the one that goes straight down the center is our old friend, the midsacral again. The external iliac artery continues until it gets to the deep femoral, where it ends. And the deep femoral goes across. It may not go all the way across. It should join or be side by side with the deep femoral vein. Once the deep femoral comes off, we've got the femoral again. Okay, that's good. And going out to the knee, we've got the popliteal again, although it's popliteal artery. And then going down the leg, we have the saphenous. It's not given the status of the great saphenous vein. It's just the saphenous artery. For practice, there you go. Okay, we're still going to start looking at some vessels in the human. This, some of us like to call the flat man model. It's on a board and he lies flat. Well, I'm going to point out the things that you would be asked. In other words, I could leave an arrow and take away all the rest of the print and ask you what's at the end of the arrow. We're not going to do it in any particular order yet. This red, this is the common iliac, common carotid artery. This happens to be on the person's left side. And if you wanted to call left common carotid artery, you'd be right. But if you wanted to call it that, you can't on the test because the test doesn't differentiate left and right. Here's the external jugular vein. Here's the external jugular vein on the other side is going to the other side of the head. Here's the common carotid going to the other side of the head. If this is external jugular, I come down and then the first part is the subclavian, just as it was in the cat. I showed you the subclavian on the other side, subclavian vein, but it's been cut off in the model here. But here's the subclavian artery, right up here. Here's the subclavian artery here. Subclavian artery and vein located or pointed to at the same spot. Follow the subclavian artery down just past the scapula start, okay, about even with the humerus head. And right there at your armpit, this is the axillary artery. You're going to get asked that one. Subclavian axillary. Here's the brachiocephalic artery right here. Here's the aortic arch. First thing off is the brachiocephalic artery, then the common carotid, then the subclavian. A for aorta, B brachiocephalic, C common carotid, S for subclavian. Here's the superior vena cava entering into the right atrium. When the superior vena cava splits, one part is the brachiocephalic, and the other part is going to be the brachiocephalic, but it's very short in this model. This is the external jugular here. So the brachiocephalic on the right side is very short. Here's the brachial artery way down here. The diaphragm here means that this now is the inferior vena cava in the abdominal cavity. Diaphragm up here, aorta, this little high belly button is the superior mesentery. Right at this point up here actually is the celiac coming straight at you with a branch going to the liver and the lungs and to the stomach. 1, 2, 3. Did I say lungs? I sort of heard myself say something wrong. It goes to the liver, the hepatic, the splenic to the spleen, and the gastric to the stomach. Here's the spleen, splenic artery, you can see here. Hepatic artery, vein, right here. I'm not going to ask you hepatic. It's just way too small. And they don't have the gastric. Okay. I don't want you to think that I am even going to ask you the celiac on this one, because you don't see the vessel itself. It's just coming straight up. It's like looking at the top of a parasol, and then you get to see the parts going off. I just don't like that arrangement. Okay, here's the abdominal aorta. Here's the renal vein. Renal artery down here. This bump here is the inferior mesenteric. This is the inferior mesenteric. Now they got it coming off this way. Sure. It really comes off straight at you. Sometimes you see it coming off the other side. When you open something up, you've got to push organs out of the way. That pushes veins and vessels to the right or to the left. Always look towards their origin or their destination. Here's the common iliac artery. Now you recall, the cat did not have a common iliac artery. There's the common iliac artery. There's the internal iliac artery. And this is the external iliac artery. Here's the common iliac vein. Here's the internal iliac vein. Here's the external iliac vein. They match up. External iliac, internal iliac, internal iliac, common iliac, arteries and veins each. Here's the midsacral artery. They haven't shown the midsacral vein in this one. This would be the point where the deep femoral would come off, and it's coming off right here, but they're not showing it going across. That's okay, then I wouldn't ask it then, but I would expect you to know that this is the limit of the body wall, and that as the artery punches through, it becomes the femoral artery. And on this side, it becomes the, right here, the femoral vein. Here's the femoral artery coming downward. We know that the popliteal will branch off of it, and that portion of the vessel that is immediately behind the knee is the popliteal. We know that the saphenous also branches off of it, probably a little higher. On this side of the diagram, here's the saphenous artery. The way you tell these apart, the popliteal is behind your kneecap, behind your knee. Popliteal, it does not pop out, it's behind. The saphenous runs on the medial side of your knee. It's easy to lose your orientation on these things sometimes because they're not always complete. But look at the destination or the origin. If it's behind the knee, it's the popliteal artery. And if it's on the medial side of the knee, it's the saphenous. If it's a vein behind the knee, then it's going to be the popliteal vein. But if it's a vein running down the medial side of the knee, it's the greater saphenous vein. Now here it is in writing. Okay, we'll be going over this probably a little bit on Thursday. Depends upon how many questions you have. And then after the lecture on exam on Tuesday, there is lab. And there's always lab after lecture exam. I feel people ready to go on, get ready for the next one. And the lecture exam, I don't feel wipes people out so much. Well, I could be wrong, but there'll be laboratory after the lecture. And then we have the following Thursday by that time for solid review. Okay. Any questions? This is a good time if there is already, because we have everybody here. Well, let me just say it then for you. Somebody is thinking, but doesn't want to be the one to say it. I feel lost on the vessels. I don't think I'm ever going to get them. Okay. Don't think that way. I'm currently not comfortable with the vessels, but I know I'll get them. Okay. Didn't you get the last portion? Did you do pretty well in the last test and the test before that? Not everybody, unfortunately, but I mean, well enough. Then you'll do well enough here. Well, okay. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, fine. Take off. And if you do have questions, just stay around and I'll answer them. But I'm going to take them off of the recording. So if you want to hear any discussion that we end up having, you need to stay for a little while. But that's up to you.